Welcome to the Sunday Sitdown, where it's not Sunday, but we are here to talk about this past Sunday. And this past Sunday, we had Allison with us preaching, and it's always a privilege to have you back with us after you abandoned us last year. No. Allison was on staff for about 7 years with us, and it was just I got to work with her for a good chunk of that time, and it was just a real gift to have her on our staff team. And it's a gift now to have her with us, as a part of our church, and occasionally when you are able as a guest preacher. And so that was you this past week, and it's a privilege as always to have you, and to have you with us now to talk through a little bit more in depth this past week. Mm-hmm. And so this past week we were reading from Luke chapter 9, and this is sort of, you described it as this turning point, this sort of like this climactic moment of Jesus revealing himself in many ways, right? And so I want to take a moment and just read it, mm-hmm. and just to sort of talk through certain parts of it that we couldn't quite make it its way into the sermon. And there was one question from someone from the church, very good question. And so let me read it first, though. So this is Luke chapter 9, starting at verse 18. Once, when Jesus was praying in private and his disciples were with him, he asked them, "Who do the crowds say that I am?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others that one of the prophets of long ago has come back to life. But what about you?" he asks. "Who do you say I am?" Peter answered, "God's Messiah." Jesus strictly warned them not to tell this to anyone. And he said, "The Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life." Then he said to them all, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self? Whoever is ashamed of me and my words, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his glory and in the glory of the Father and of the holy angels. Truly I tell you, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the kingdom of God." Just like a light passage, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Just a nice summer sermon.
For sure. What was your processing of it as you were preparing? Like, what was your,
Yeah, it felt really weighty. It mm-hmm. felt loaded. And it did feel like this really significant moment, that it's been building to this. There's been all these opportunities for people to learn about Jesus, whether that's what he's saying or teaching or observing what he's doing. And now he's with his, the people that have seen the most and been the closest to him on the road. Mm-hmm. And he asked this question. Mm-hmm. And so, I kind of joke that it was like an exam, but mm-hmm. it really does feel a bit like in order to understand this passage, I felt like you really have to understand what's come before. And that's not to say, of course, the Spirit can speak through wherever we're at and with whatever we know. But maybe the better way to say it is, the more that you know and understand of the previous 9 mm-hmm. chapters, mm-hmm. the more that this will kind of come to life. And so I think it felt significant in that. And then I think it also just feels really significant because I think the truth of it is the way that we answer this question should actually change everything.
It should, yeah. And it's one of the reasons why I've loved the way that we've been going through this whole book, right? That we're able to see the threads all the way through. Mm-hmm. I even just like, as you kind of alluded to it in the sermon as well, but even, we talked about it when you and I met up last week, mm-hmm. when we looked at the examples, when Jesus says, who do the crowd say mm-hmm. I am? And they talk about, John the Baptist and Elijah and prophets of old. And it's like when you remove it from its broader context, you're like, okay, well, that makes sense, but it makes more sense when you look at what was happening just a few sections ago, right?
Yeah.
And this is why it's so beautiful and so good to be able just to connect all these dots. So, but yeah, we're seeing the culmination of something here, of all that these disciples have been seeing and doing, and now they have this realization of like, man, this guy is more than we could have ever thought. We thought we were just going to follow this rabbi around, and we've now come to realize that I think he's more, you know?
And it's a bit of a unique moment of the disciples getting it.
Yeah.
Like I think often
Yeah.
I appreciate the disciples because we can relate to them because they're not getting it or they're missing it or and I think we'll talk probably more about this. I don't think they get everything.
No.
Because there's plenty of interactions to come where you're like, oh, they really don't fully understand. But it is a nice moment of being like, okay, but they are seeing this. They're seeing him for who he is. And it's a really profound moment. And again, I think when we get used to these terms and used to these words, it's easy for us to gloss over these things, and miss how significant it was that Peter was able to name him in that way.
Yeah. So, yeah, it makes me think of the first question, which is Jesus's use of the phrase, you have to deny yourself, take up your cross daily, and follow me. And that phrase, take up your cross, there is a cultural phrase. It's become codified in culture almost of like, this is my cross to bear. This is like, it would, usually is implying suffering or whatever else. Right. And so sometimes it's hard to like untangle that from, what Jesus is asking his disciples to do. And also recognizing, that Jesus talks about being killed, but doesn't explicitly mention crucifixion. Right. And so, how would his disciples, and I know that part of this is going to be speculation a little bit, but I think it's worth exploring. How would his disciples have understood Jesus using that term, take up your cross daily and follow me?
Yeah, because as you noted, he says that he will be rejected and killed and on the third day raised, but he doesn't specifically say in that moment, I'm going to be killed on a cross. But in the very next phrase, he's saying, this is what's going to happen to the Messiah, the Son of Man. And for my followers, you're going to follow basically the same path. And in that context, he does say, take up their cross daily.
So it's like implied.
I think you could make that leap, but I also don't judge them for not connecting those dots.
Yeah, I'm not sure they would have.
I don't think. Yeah.
Evidence would suggest. It feels like. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's hard to know some of what they would have expected. I think, from my understanding, crucifixion was a known form of Roman punishment, and so at least that term I think would have brought to mind a specific image for them. And my understanding is that when you were sentenced to death by crucifixion, the expectation was that you would carry the crossbeam to the place where you were going to be crucified. Like that was sort of part of the sentencing. So there was, I think, some language around, again, I think it probably would evoke a picture for them. Maybe they had seen other people who had been sentenced carrying a crossbeam and had a picture of what that looked like. So I think he's using, as he often does, a reference that would have meaning for them. But I don't expect them to have, like we're going to see, they still are not fully expecting all of what's to come. And I think maybe part of what's helpful there is to realize just how, I don't know if shocking is the right word or revolutionary, what he's saying here about the Messiah is. And I think maybe that's a helpful part. So the idea would have been that the Messiah would come in and like they were under Roman occupation and they were being oppressed. And so there was this idea of like a political revolution and political freedom and come in and knock out all the Romans. And when he says to them, okay, you know, I'm the Messiah, basically, here's what it means to be Messiah. That's not what they're thinking.
No.
Now, there are, like, when I was digging into some of the Old Testament references that talk about this anointed one, which is more a Hebrew word, anointed one, that gets translated as Christ. There is reference to the Messiah being killed. But again, I don't know that that was the common expectation. And so I think this idea of him being like, this is what it means to be Messiah, rejected, killed, raised. Oh, and also, if you're going to be my followers, you're going to follow in the same.
It feels very like it's very subversive, and you know, like subverting expectation, subverting probably a common understanding of what the Messiah was coming to do and bring, and to say, actually, you know, I and some of you may die by the hands of this Roman instrument of crucifixion, you know. It's that probably would have thrown them if they had like properly grasped it. And again, we're still not sure whether they properly grasped it, but yeah.
Yeah. And, a couple of things you'd mentioned before. So the daily piece is interesting because this is recorded in I'm blanking on what other gospels right now, but I do know that the daily part is unique to Luke, which is interesting. And as I said on Sunday, I think a commentary I read supported this too, emphasizes more about how you will live in light of that than just the death. Like, it's not just you're going to be martyred or something necessarily. So what does it mean to live with that daily? I think there's also a question, like back to what you were saying about your cross to bear. I don't know what that means and what like counts, if you will, or doesn't count. One of the commentaries that I read was sort of saying, I think the commentary would suggest that what you were saying is probably more broad than what was intended. Like, just anything bad that ever happens to me maybe is not. Like the commentary.
This is my cross to bear.
Yeah, the commentary I was reading suggested more the specific laying down of life that, like, for the sake of the kingdom.
Yeah.
When there is a cost to you to do that, if that makes sense.
And that's where I think you can infer that, like, you know, we can't die every day, like literally.
Yeah.
And so that's why, like, you know, you can, you know, pretty well understand that, like, they can understand that Jesus was saying something that was meant to be taken as a metaphor of sorts, right? Yeah, some of them do. We understand, you know, by tradition, die in that way, but more so, it seems to be, this call to well, he says, deny yourself and to take up your cross, to that there will be sacrifice, there will be suffering, but it's all for the sake of the kingdom.
Yeah, it's part of why I brought in that Greek word for life. So there's different words in Greek for life. We just have the one and are limited by that. But there's at least 3 that I know of, and maybe more, words for life in the Greek. And this one is psyche. And what I'm going to say is not the fullness of what it means, but I think it's helpful. And that is that I think there's an emphasis on, in that kind of life, like your ideas about life, your hopes, your ambitions, your dreams, your ideas about what your life would look like. And anytime that it talks about the life that God gives us, it's a whole different word in the Greek, and it's not that psyche word. So at the risk, you can cut this out later, but at the risk of veering into John, for instance, when there's a similar passage in John and it says, if you lay down your life, you get my life. That's 2 different words. It's if you lay down psyche, you get Zoe.
Right.
And so Zoe is always like the fullness, abundant. It gets translated as eternal life. It's like the richness of life that God gives. And it only comes from God giving that to us. And so I think that's I think that does have interesting application for us in terms of, I don't want to diminish a call to like actually lay down our physical life, if that was required of us, which in our current geographic location and place is not often.
Probably not likely.
Not likely,
Yeah.
although again, that's different for people in different parts of the world for sure. But so what does it look like to lay down like, oh, this is really what I thought my life would look like, or I really had been hoping for this, or comfort, I think was a big one. I was sort of naming and wrestling this week, like, oh, I like to be comfortable more than I would care to admit. And so what are those things that we are being asked to lay down, and what does that look like to do it daily? And I don't,
Maybe like one of the questions that comes up for me following up from that is, how do we know? Like, you know, we all have dreams and hopes and ambitions and things that may be of God, they may not be of God. And it almost kind of comes down to like, you know, broader questions about like discerning God's will. Like if, you know, Jesus is saying, deny yourself, take up your cross. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it. Whoever loses their life for me will save it. You know, gaining the whole world and then yet losing or forfeiting your very self. And it's like, that's heavy. And yet we're all still living our lives and doing our, you know, everyday, just normal things. Right. And like, there's a tension there, that doesn't always feel solvable. Where it's like, we are called to do great and big things for the kingdom, but we're also called to just often be in our everyday life. And do you have any thoughts around that? Like, I'm just trying to process that of this big call, but also discerning God's will and what is what are the ambitions and dreams and hopes that we might be called to give up, you know?
Yeah, I think it's partly why, as I was wrestling with this in preparation, I came back to like, how are we supposed to know this? Like, how are we supposed to figure this out? Kind of just like what you're saying. And that's where I came to the like, well, it's got to be in community. Like I do feel like it is appropriate and right to wrestle. I actually think that that's like, it's not the only thing, but to like think and struggle with how we spend our money and with the choices that we make and with the things that we say yes to. Like, I think it's actually right and appropriate to wrestle those things out. And I do feel like there's definitely been times for me where it feels like God has impressed upon me, oh, this is really the thing. But also, or along with maybe, community has played a really significant role in helping to affirm that or confirm that or to help me even get to that place. But I think it means that we have to, like I said, I talk about these things more with one another. So in my time with InterVarsity, I had a really beautiful experience of working closely with a staff team and community. And for both those of us on staff, but also spouses and families, we kind of entered into life together in a pretty unique way where we actually processed like personal decisions together, because we recognized that the decisions that someone on our team made would actually impact the rest of us. And it was quite countercultural because you don't normally kind of open yourself up to talking about those things with other people or letting other people have influence in it. But it was such a rich time and a rich season. And part of that communal discernment and helping each other make decisions and offering, kind of holding lightly to what we had, led to Jordan and I, it was before Zoe was born, but living in a community house with a single guy and then another couple and a 2-year-old. And that was not easy, but it was so rich. Like, it really felt like that taste of the kingdom kind of thing. And that came out of us saying, we're going to hold lightly to the places that we're all living and the homes that we have. And we're going to let each other influence our decisions and the decisions that we make. And I think probably we would do well to do that more with one another in our church context. I would love to see us growing in those ways where we are having some of those conversations where we're talking about, you know, I have this decision coming up, or I'm wondering about this renovation, or I'm thinking about this, or what about this? Like, and we're actually letting each other have input on the choices that we make, and not just to make us feel better about like
confirmation bias.
Yeah. Just like, well, you should definitely buy that whatever video game, Justin, because I'm picking on you. You can pick things for me for sure. But anyway, I think I've veered, I think, way off wherever we started. But I do think that there's like, I don't know how to figure this out. And I think part of it means that we should wrestle it out in community. But I think that in order to do that, we're going to have to let people in and let people influence things that are not normally private. And no, we don't talk about those things. That's my
in polite
business.
society, we don't do that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
I think I love that this is the answer a lot of the time with a lot of these deeper kind of questions. We've been asking ourselves, like, you know, questions like this, and then the answer is often, we got to do it in community.
Yeah.
And one of these days we're actually going to like do it. Yeah. You know, I think like the more my hope at least is the more that we talk about this, like truly talk about it, truly encourage one another in this way, that we will begin to do that work, which is uncomfortable. It is challenging for it kind of bucks against our modern Western polite, individualism, etc. Yeah. So that's my hope and prayer is that the more that we do this, the more we'll actually start to hear stories about people doing it.
Well, because then it becomes part of our culture. Right? Yeah. So, and then we can be weird together.
I
which
love
is beautiful,
it.
Right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I want. That's great. Okay, so one other question that came to my mind as I was listening and then re-listening on, actually it was more than 1.5 speed. I re-listened on 1.75.
Oh.
You speak at a nice cadence that I was able to re-listen intelligibly at 1.75.
Oh, good to know. I'm surprised to hear that because I feel like I tend to pack a lot.
And so that was just as I was like driving my daughter back from, or dropping her off at camp and then coming here this morning. I was like, I'm going to just give her a quick re-listen so that I can refresh my mind on things. And one of the questions that came to my mind was, so Jesus asks this question to the disciples. He says, "Who do you say that I am?" And we've talked about that as that really crucial question. And then he explains all, once they answer, he then kind of unloads on them this knowledge of what is going to take place. And as we've said, they don't fully get it. Like they clearly have times later on where they're like, what are you talking about, Jesus? So it doesn't all sink in here. They're probably overwhelmed. They're probably overloaded, but Jesus clearly was signaling that they're ready to at least start understanding. Right. So one of the questions that I want to ask is, what are the signs that someone is ready to hear more of who Jesus is, hear the message of the kingdom of God, of the gospel, of whatever? Like, what are some of the signs that and I would imagine you probably have some experience in real time seeing this with your work with InterVarsity and
Yeah, I think so. A couple things come to mind. So we reference parables as being this kind of filter to help see kind of who's ready. But the biggest distinguishing feature, I think I would say, between who's ready and who's not, at least when it comes to the parables, is the people that are ready ask. they're curious and they want to know more. And that's what happens in the parable of the sower. Everyone gets to hear the parable, but then his disciples are like, wait, hang on a second. Yeah. What does this actually mean? Like, tell us more. We want to know. And then he gives them so much more. It's kind of similar, right? They get to hear so much more. And so it sounds really simple, but in that way, I think it's kind of those who are asking. And to back up a little bit further, I think that part of the beauty of parables is they provoke curiosity. And I think that there's ways that we can live that also provoke that curiosity. We can kind of live parables that invite others to notice, to wonder, to, it's kind of the being weird together.
Yeah.
But to ask. And I think that can be an indication that there's a curiosity there. Now, I don't think that's necessarily everything, but I think that that's a good start. The second thing I would just say, it's another book recommendation. It's called I Once Was Lost. Our staff team read this a few years ago. And in that book, they map out what they call 5 thresholds. And it kind of talks about different stages of people essentially on a journey to faith. And what I found really helpful was the room that it gives for, I think, a broader spectrum than what I at least had, the framework that I kind of had a in or out a little bit thinking before. And those 5 thresholds I found really helpful to think about. What is it? It filled out the journey a little bit better. And one of those thresholds is curiosity. And so it's a super, super short book. I think we have it in our library. Yeah. I would definitely recommend it as a way to kind of help conceptualize and think a little bit about that in terms of not just who's ready, but what are they ready for? And that's some of what those 5 thresholds talk about is here's where somebody who's at this stage, what it might look like. And here's maybe what is helpful for them on a journey for what's next. So it may not be, a full gospel presentation when somebody asks one question. That may not be the most helpful thing at that time. Perhaps it is. But it helps to kind of think about, like, how can I be genuine in sharing my faith and genuine in, genuine in truly caring for people where they actually are and not where I'm trying to get them or where I might want them to be. Like, where are they actually? And so what does care look like in that place? But yeah, I think it gives a helpful framework a little bit along the ready piece. And I think lastly, I would just say those are all, the ready really is the heart posture. I think that's like the simplest way I can talk about it when you think about, even in that parable of the different types of soil, like, it's about your heart. Yeah. Is there a heart of humility, of a learning heart, ready to know that you don't know it all, to be ready to learn, to receive, to hear more from others? I think a good indication of that is this person willing to have others speak into their life? I think that's true for somebody who's curious, but I think that's also, like, critically true for leaders in ministry too, is like, it's a really good warning sign for better or for worse. If that person, who are the mentor, who are people, like, do they have a heart that's teachable and open to receive like mentoring or wisdom or correction? Yeah. I think all of those can be some indications of the status of our heart and where we're at.
Yeah. I've seen that in friends who are on varying journeys in their life. And sometimes it's, as they've gotten to know me, they're like, that guy seems okay. He's not a total nut job. Yeah. And it's like, well, maybe, but there are, there have been moments where even just, someone being a faithful presence, maybe they're like weird in the right ways, and normal in the right ways. And then that can provoke that curiosity of just like, okay, what's your deal? Like, and we had a neighbor, they've now since moved away, but like, where they had grown up in church, and now we're kind of like agnostic atheists and had some real bad taste in their mouth, but they I think they saw something different in me and the way that I carried myself, the way that I approached my faith. And I don't say that to like pat myself on the back, but I just felt like I was just being myself. Right. And that, like, it led to some pretty fruitful discussions. Like I, and I wish they hadn't moved away, because I think that I would have loved to have seen that conversation continue. But I know that they were further away, but there was some level of like readiness to hear some things, where we might agree on, common ground, where we might disagree on certain things. And so like it was an interesting group of people to sort of see that work out in real time, of like, okay, they're not ready here, but they seem to be ready for some conversation here. And there has to be some social awareness, sometimes people can just sort of like jam their way into a situation, force themselves into a situation. It's a bad idea.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, there's so much more we could say on this, but
so much. Yeah.
There's like, there has to be genuine care.
Yeah.
Right. And, what is for the best for this person? And am I like, maybe somebody with a good heart posture, like, is checking their own heart, right? Like, is actually more concerned about the state of their own heart and where they're at. Maybe that's another indication, and making sure that they're in alignment.
I think that, yeah, I said this a couple of weeks ago in my sermon at the beginning of Luke 9, but I think it plays in here, this idea of like, you can't coerce someone into the kingdom.
No.
Nor can you just like convince them by just like a compelling argument. Like, that might get them some of the way there in terms of like, not the coercion part, definitely not the coercion part, but maybe there's convincing that could take place. But there's like, you're never going to coerce someone, right? And so the more that we push in unhelpful and unhealthy ways, that could also drive people away.
Well, I think we have the exact opposite example here in the passage we're talking about, right? Like, Jesus doesn't, like, he's being careful who he's saying this to.
He's like, don't tell anyone, because they're not ready to hear that.
Yeah, that's right. Like, he's actually giving a really different model, or he's giving a model of a life lived, pointing to truth, and also making sure that when people are ready to hear that truth, because he wants everyone to, he's not trying to hide that, but he's wanting them to, they're going to be more ready to receive and accept that truth, when their heart is in that place.
Yeah. Well, we hope that this has been helpful for just as good fodder for discussion, as an opportunity to go a little deeper. There's so much more we could have gotten to. I know that we didn't get a chance to talk about Elijah and some of the cool stuff there, but we hope that you'll be able to go deeper, to think more about this passage, to think a little bit more about what it means to take up our cross daily and follow Jesus, and to think more intentionally about when someone is ready to hear more about the faith that we hold so close. So please continue to bring questions forth. You can send those questions to questions@courtrightchurch.org. Ideally, we would get those kind of at some point on Sunday or early Monday morning, so that we're able to record often, usually on Monday. So we hope that you have a great rest of your week, as we are in kind of the waning days of summer, and we hope to see you again next week.